Battle droids is a term that became widespread in the galaxy thanks to the Confederacy of Independent Systems leading up to and during the Clone Wars. This transmission will explore the full history of every variation of the B1 Battle Droid. Let's get into it. The most famous use of a droid army was of course during the Clone Wars. The backbone of this army was the B1 series Battle Droid. The B1 was a cheaply produced basic infantry unit manufactured by Bactoid Combat Automata and Bactoid Armored Workshop. The cheap cost delivered cheap results. The program personalities were questionable, the droids were flimsy, easily destroyed, and only effective in combat in overwhelming numbers. Even worse, entire battalions of the early generations of these droids were controlled by a single central control computer. If the link to this computer was destroyed, the entire army running off of it would be completely useless. A shortcoming the Trade Federation learned harshly during their occupation of the planet Naboo. Future versions of the B1 would have more independent systems to avoid this major issue. The B1 series was part of the OOM line, which included many variations, security, pilot, and command being some of the most prevalent. The B1s were intentionally designed with humanoid stance and proportions. This allowed them to assimilate into existing life more easily and operate existing machinery, ships, vehicles, and weapons without every task needing special customizations. While the units technically could operate a multitude of things, they didn't operate any one thing particularly well. The lanky design allowed the units to fold up rather small. This made storage, transport, and deployment much easier, a crucial feature given that they were only effective in huge numbers. With nearly every expense cut, the B1s did manage to have some beneficial tech inside their shells. Their photoreceptors had an infrared mode, and each unit had a comlink as well as scanners that could pick up on electromagnetic fields. The cheap programming of the individual units led to numerous glitches. Most of these glitches didn't affect combat performance, not that that was ever stellar. The glitches mostly manifested as personality quirks. Primary quirks being the droids constantly stating the obvious things they saw going on around them, as well as a wide range of vocalization that mimicked what the sentient beings around them would consider emotional expressions. The base B1 Battle Droid got a slight upgrade when they made the B1 Droid Commander. They could relay orders from the tactical droids or organic beings that ran the show, usually from a base of operations or capital ship distant from the battle itself. The commanders seemed to be able to keep their wits about them a bit more, but I've found no indication that their programming had received any significant upgrades. The OOM security droids were also from the B1 line. The droid itself was largely the same as the core B1 unit, except the red paint to distinguish it as security, and many received a comlink booster. Their most common function was sentry or guard duty. They were also used for crowd control, but the same lackluster programming that affected the B1s with personality quirks made them easily flustered as their logic circuits would overload. Memory wipes were common to keep things in check. Some rare security droids were given an E5S, which is the sniper configuration of the Battle Droid's standard E5 blaster. Continuing on in the B1 line is the OOM pilot droid. These droids were given blue markings. As their name indicates, they were used to pilot and crew starships. Their programming also allowed them to be relatively effective gunners. They also had the basic B1 programming, so a blaster could be slapped into their hands, and they would function as infantry, though the pilot models would complain about this type of assignment. The pilots actually received better programming than the other B1 variants. They could problem solve, think on the fly, and resisted the bulk of the quirks that played the rest of the line. Not all of them, but a good amount. Similar to the pilot version, AAT or Armored Assault Tank droids were created. They were able to pilot more than just the tank that they were named after, but that was their primary function. Their programming was similar to the typical B1, quirks and all. They were often used as ground troops on planets with dense foliage as they had dark green markings that served as camouflage. The B1 rocket variant is named for the rocket packs they're all equipped with. These rocket boosters allowed these unique B1s to fly in open space in search of salvage, escape pods, or whatever else may be out there. They sported a unique black and orange paint scheme. Their packs could also be used in atmosphere, but their primary function was in open space. The B1 recon droid was made for reconnaissance. These droids were given long-range communicators, and I would have to imagine upgrades to their optical inputs. It seems their creators were phoning it in with some of these variations. Many capital starships had a contingent of firefighter battle droids. These droids were distinguished by their cool black base with yellow paint stripe jobs and a red dot on their heads. Some B1s were built to provide heavier fire than the standard handheld blasters and repeaters. They weren't as big or effective as the super battle droids that would come later, and I'll cover those in a follow-up transmission, but they were were given larger armaments than a typical soldier would carry. What had to be the least effective version of the B1 was the B1 Grapple Droid. These droids were not given any weapons, but had grappling hands on each arm. The arms were fortified, giving them a bit more strength than the standard B1. They were painted white with green and given black photoreceptors along with comlink boosters. I don't know why a droid made for hand-to-hand combat that wasn't even effective in that role needed a comlink booster, but they got it. Strangely enough, after the Clone Wars, a marauder group that went by the Bedlam Raiders supplemented their forces with repurposed B1 Battle Droids. Many of these were converted for melee combat. While they weren't made any tougher and their personality quirks still ran rampant, they seemed more effective in combat than the grapple-only melee model. This transmission was originally going to cover all of the Battle Droid variants, not just the B1s. I was 2 pages into typing and still on the basic B1, so the rest will be moved to a transmission all their own to round up the rest. This was also created at the request of a viewer. I've done a few now at viewer request, which has been amazing. I love it that people are watching and responding and asking for specific things. So a huge thank you to everyone who's been watching so far. If this is your first video of mine, stick around for more awesome Star Wars lore and reach out if you want something specific covered. Check out this transmission next for more awesome Star Wars content.